Assalamu alaikum guys, welcome back to the hashtag Making Waves podcast. I'm your host for today, Sully, and I'm joined by the other two WAP members, Aadil and the other Sully. Today we're going to be talking about something that I've been really wanting to touch upon, given the circumstances of the world and the situation, things that are happening in the news right now. I thought it'd be the perfect time to bring it up. And what we're going to be talking about today is manhood, what it takes to be a real man. Now, the opinions that we're going to express today are all our own. These are views that we are sharing through our own experiences, through our own learnings. And the intention of this podcast today is to say things that we are learning right now, things that we are going through right now, things that we've learned in the past, with the intention of helping each other, obviously here today, and also being able to benefit our listeners as well. And obviously, I would really recommend for you guys to listen to the entirety of the podcast. And then if you have any comments or opinions or thoughts that you'd like to share, just leave them in the comments in our YouTube or our Instagram or DM us. And hopefully sometime in the future, when the COVID situation relaxes, we can bring on a guest, someone who's a lot more older, wiser and more experienced to enlighten us on the situation. And maybe we can have some women on as well to tell us what they expect of an upstanding man. But without further ado, I'm going to get straight into the topic. And as you can tell, I'm really excited to talk about this. I'm going to jump straight into it just to get an overview of where we're at. So I want to ask you two, if you had to describe an upstanding man, an honourable man in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use? And you can use the same words if someone's already said it. But yeah, I'll start with you, Sully. What 3 words would you describe a good man as?
Patient, brave, and understanding.
Okay, Aadil?
Strong, empathetic, and courageous.
Wow. Okay, so my 3 words would be a protector, someone who serves, and a leader. So I want to go a bit more into it. So I'm going to ask you to briefly describe, in your opinion, in a couple of sentences, what is an honourable man. Men should be honoured. It's an honourable thing to be a man. And you know, as one of our favourite speakers, Hobler, says that all men are males, but not all males are men. Mm-hmm. So what does it take to be a man? Just very briefly.
That's a tough question. What does it take to be a man? But from my 3 words that I gave to describe, I can say that a man, as you said, a leader, but that sort of covers everything in every aspect. So being patient, being brave. So it's not the way people perceive men as big, strong, muscular, intimidating look. It's the one that can look after the closest people around him to create a better society rather than corruption. That's my definition.
Wow. Aadil, what about you?
So, very much similar to what your opinions are in terms of being an honourable man. But for me, I don't believe every man is and can always be a leader, because I think that's attributed to very special men. But something that every man can be is courageous. You don't have to be the strongest to be courageous. You don't have to be you can be timid and be courageous. Mm-hmm. Also, being strong isn't just being physically strong. It's being strong to take backlash, different opinions, but still being able to overcome all those things. I think that's what makes someone strong. And being empathetic is very important, because one thing we know as men, we're always going to have people who are either emotional or who are going to be what's the way I'm looking for?
A bit more sensitive.
Yeah. So being empathetic to them and understanding them, and also being able to be in their shoes, is very important.
Okay. It's quite funny, your sentence, actually, because firstly, I'm going to say something that opposes your first sentence entirely. So hopefully you'll be a man about that. But I would argue and say that every single man, or the majority of men, have to be leaders, and you have no choice in that. That is the opinion that I hold. And I'll go into a bit more detail later on, because my brief description of an honourable, upstanding man would be that it is someone who puts other people first, like you said, Sully, and someone who is a leader, but a servant leader. And what I mean by this is, like in a wolf pack, the leader of a wolf pack is the wolf that's at the back of the pack. And why? What is a leader? What is a good leader? A good leader is someone who's at the forefront of risk, and always eats last because he looks after his people. So if you read into wolf packs and how they work, you know, when they're like running in packs through the snow or the forest or whatever it is, the leader stays at the back, one because he can visualize and see what's going on and manage and lead, but also because a wolf pack is more likely to be attacked from the back. So he's at the back physically, but in terms of the scenario, he's at the forefront of risk of being attacked. But when it comes to feeding, he will always be last. And that is what I feel a man should be. And one of the interesting points that we've sort of already touched upon, if you look at the words that we've used, we've said that a leader essentially, a man essentially is someone that protects and serves. So this begs the question, why is so much of the world living in fear? If, for example, let's say 50% of the population is men and their role is to protect and serve and be empathetic, why are so many people living in fear? Why are there so many women living in fear? It just doesn't add up. So it shows us that there's some kind of core problem bigger than us as individuals. And we need to be part of that solution. You know, we've established now through what I've said that men are the problem in this scenario that we're talking about. So that means that men are the solution.
Yeah.
Now, I don't expect an answer because that's a very deep question.
No, it's very powerful.
It's a very deep question.
And yeah, I would agree with it. Men are the problem and they can only be the solution, and that's my heavily opinionated viewpoint of it. Like as you said, it's 50%, 50%, then we are the problem and we need to bring a solution. And to answer that question, why is this happening? Because there are not enough real men. There are too many weak men. There's too and it just comes down to the transition of how many weak men will turn into a strong man, and understand that they're not strong yet until they become a real man.
Yeah.
So a point I want to cover very quickly in terms of there's too many weak men. In every generation, there's always been weak men. You look at it, there's always bad people in a scenario. There's people who like to do things that shouldn't be allowed. Even back in the prophets' days, all the different prophets, yeah? Now, with the modern generation, there's just more weak men than there are strong men. And I think a big problem behind that is the matter of fact of their desires overcoming who they are as people.
Yeah.
And the biggest part to play with that is the people who are at the top are the weak men. Because they're not weak in terms of they're intelligent, they're strong in terms of they're very intelligent men, but they're weak when it comes down to their desires of what they want.
I think that their strength is they have strength, but the strength is misplaced. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, misplaced 100%.
But the other thing I wanted to say is I want to make this very clear about the whole strength thing. Yeah, I mean you've touched upon it already, but I want to make it so clear. Firstly, even before I go into that, I want to say that every single time I think I'm a man, I read something or watch something or listen to a podcast, and it always like, oh crap, I'm not a man yet. There's still so much for me left to do.
I agree. So that's one thing I want to make clear as well in this podcast. Like we're preaching / giving advice based on our experiences of our transition, because I want to go into that later, how we all transition from boys to men. Yeah. Every single man out there was once upon a time a boy or a weak man, but it doesn't mean we're at the top. Like we're still learning so much. We're on in our early 20s, so 40-year-old listening to this right now probably laughing at us saying these guys don't know anything about a strong man, you know. So it's just from what we know, and we obviously spread the waves and make the waves for other people to understand how to get to that.
Exactly. So just going back to that point that I want to make in terms of strength, clarity. Yeah. So as kids, we are brought up to think that the strength that we need to acquire or seek is physical strength. You see, when you are guided, when you don't have a good role model or you don't heed to the role models that are in your life, you start to look for things in the wrong places. Yeah. So the strength that men are measured to in this day and age is external factors. I was listening to a podcast just the other day, a few months back actually, and he was talking about this very same thing, and he was saying that strength in men is measured in external factors, mainly in wealth and in physical strength. So for example, like if you have money, you need to show it off. You have a car, you have a good house, whatever, you need to show it off, and oh, this makes me a man.
Yeah.
Or oh, I am this tall and I am this strong and I can lift this much weight and I can beat this many guys, that means I am strong. But this ideology breaks down the whole structure, the whole idea of being a man. Because what about a man who is physically disadvantaged, has body dysmorphia, has hormone imbalance, or is amputated or disabled? They have a disadvantage. They can't physically be strong, and they may not be physically able to earn the money that we may be able to do. So does that mean they can never be a man?
My definition to that is alpha or macho, male, not man. Alpha male, macho male.
Yeah.
Yes, that is what they are. Strong, big, can beat guys up, but that's not what a man is.
Exactly.
Do you get what I mean?
So what I'm trying to say is, like, this whole idea of your wealth and your ability to get girls and your physical strength, if you are measuring your manhood by these attributes, then you have debunked, you have basically just brought down the house of cards that we've built men upon. Because like I'm saying, like, there's some people out there, it's just not in their risk to be rich.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So are you saying that is not going to be a man? Some of the greatest leaders, some of the greatest men of history that we look up to were poor. Yeah, or they chose to be poor, or they just didn't earn that money. But they weren't hold to be great men because of the money they had or the physical strength they had.
Definitely.
It's because of the values that they had.
And they chose to be rich in other areas.
Exactly.
But I want to talk about where you were just mentioning about men having to show off, right? And very quickly, I can't remember the name of the bird, but what's the bird that brings all of this?
Peacock.
A peacock, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I call this the peacock syndrome. So these men they don't feel like they have enough value as people to bring to people. Instead, they've got to bring values from outside areas, like you're talking about. So having the biggest house and the fastest car and all of that stuff, right? The problem with that is, once all of that goes, what is left behind?
Wow.
A very frail person, a person that lacks value. So do you know how, and this is just my own personal view, I believe men have this peacock syndrome simply because they feel like that's what the gender they are after wants. They think the man or the female is after a big house and a fast car because they want to be able to provide something to them. They want to give them some sort of value. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, because every man should be able to provide. Like, I believe it's your duty as a man to provide.
100%.
But why is that the only thing you're providing? Why can't you provide an empathetic person, a person that can hold you when you're feeling weak and can make you feel strong, a person that can make you laugh? Our priorities are misplaced simply because we've got so many voices outside of what we believe, giving us different directions. And I think we need to actually find out what are the core staples of our beliefs.
I agree, man. Like, the whole point that you said, like, there's different areas to provide in. Like, and I think we put too much emphasis on providing money, providing, materialistic things. Obviously, that's a massive responsibility. But at the same time, as men, I think we forget, like you're saying, the emotional responsibility, the mental responsibility, the social responsibilities we have.
Yeah.
And I think, I would say, like, to an extent, they play a bigger role than the materialistic responsibilities you have.
Definitely.
Because that's what lives on, really and truly, isn't it?
Investing your time is probably the most important thing for a man, a family man.
Yeah. But we're going to touch on that later on.
Okay.
Because I still want to establish the problem with men and also...
Oh, I can go into that.
Yeah, I mean...
So what I wanted to mention was about the females, and this is going to be so controversial, but a lot of females in the modern age, they want so many different things from men. Like, do you know how weak men say they want a woman that's thick, a woman that's pretty-faced, intelligent, hard-working, hustler, can make money as well, and they can go 50-50 on everything, and they can just take over the world. Like, that's the stigma that's been brought about by many people, like the social media generation. Now, there's nothing wrong in that, right? But what you're wanting in a person is not the main things that's going to make a stable relationship. And the same thing goes for men. So a lot of females want a man that's 6 foot, built like a brick house, and has money, and has charisma and has confidence and so many different things.
Adil's basically describing himself at this point.
Yeah, charisma.
But the problem
Apart
with
from
that
the 6
is, I'm 5 foot, man. The problem with that is though, you're asking too much from. You're basically trying to build a man, and it's really ridiculous because. Alright, one thing, based on psychology alone, there's so many different men out there. And I can guarantee you, not every man can have every single quality. Not every man can be tall. It might be a shorter man, but he might have the charisma of...
He's more of a man.
Yeah, he has so many different qualities. You can't build a man. Now, psychology, you're talking about an alpha male, right? An alpha male, there's also a beta male, a gamma male, and there's 2 others. I can't remember them. But they're all based off of a theory. So it's not 100%. But basically saying that every man has different qualities adapted to them. And that's why I was saying not every man can be a leader. Like every man has to be a leader, but not every man is an innate leader. So they can't lead. For example, if you were to have an army, it's going to be a general because he has an innate ability to be a leader. Now the other people can lead a small platoon, but they can't lead a larger area. And that's what I'm saying, not everyone's an innate leader. Now everyone can be a leader in different avenues. But that same thing of not everyone can be a leader, not everyone can be charismatic or can be the most confident person because they will come against other people, and this is where I'm making my big point now. They're going to come up to other people who have a larger ability. Now, the same point, women can have these same qualities that a man desires. So now I think the real problem here is a lot of women are now becoming adaptable to have the same qualities as men, not needing them to have a man, if you get what I'm saying. Because in our modern society, there's a lot of weak men leaving behind women having to build themselves and become a man themselves. Not genetically, but
in terms of their qualities.
Psychologically and in terms of who they are as a person. And the biggest flaw has come to us weak men leaving women to battle by themselves and not needing men anymore. And that's where the whole thing of we don't need a man has come from. Because they have got the qualities to be a man, and there's not enough men with the qualities needed to be a man.
I agree, man.
And I think that's where a big problem
is. I agree.
Deep, man.
I agree. Like for me, if you want to ask me what's your opinion of a weak man, and again, very personal opinion. We haven't lived to that life level yet where we've had kids and we understand how it works, but it's the absence of a dad, like a child growing up without a dad. That's for me, that's weak. What my opinion of weak man is, not having any presence with his kids. 2 ways where he's split away from his wife or his missus or whatever, and second way is when he's actually living at the home. Things are okay, but too busy at work, too busy with his friends, no actual upbringing of his children and stuff like that. For me, that's like total. That's you're basically bringing a child into society without a father role model, which a child 100% needs, regardless. And it takes a society and community to bring up a child. So it's not just the dad's role to do it, but it's also our role. It's also the role of the imam or the priest at a church, teachers, mentors, football coaches, the barber, the butcher. Every man that encounters this child, when he comes to that, you need to bring enough. I was inspired by Hoblos about that. It takes a whole community to bring up a child. So God forbid any of us, and we were talking about fears that time, and I realised another fear that I have is not being a present father for my children. One day, inshallah, if I have children, and etc. Not being present, being too busy with work, being too busy with projects. You need to make time. I feel like you really need to have time for your kids, because that is it's important, man.
I love that. I think one word that we've talked about, but we didn't mention the actual word in detail, is responsibilities. I was watching an interview with David Goggins. He's like the Iron Man, the world's strongest, most fittest man or something like that.
The world's strongest man, because strength doesn't come from physical strength.
Yeah, exactly. So what he was saying in this interview was that to be a man is the biggest responsibility anyone could ever have, because of all of the responsibilities they hold. Like you were mentioning, especially if you're a father, or even we can all relate to being an elder sibling or an uncle or an elder cousin. We've got young infants in our families, and we are essentially a role model for them. We might not be parents, but we can relate in that aspect. But I also want to touch back upon the point that you're making about a macho man or an alpha man. You see, the problem that we went through, I'm sure I'm speaking for you guys as well, and a lot of guys, you know, when you're going through that stage of, you know, early teenage years, you feel like you need to show that you're alpha. You need to show up for the fight. And when there's a fight going down, regardless of who's right or who's wrong, you're in that fight. You're backing your boys, yeah. And this whole idea is that, let me tell you, a real alpha doesn't need to show their alpha. They sit back, they observe, and they are secure within themselves that I am an alpha male. That I
just debunk something though very quickly. So I used to believe in the whole alpha male thing. And I think it's the biggest load of BS created by social media and by marketing I've ever seen in my life.
I think
because an alpha male, if you go into psychology and you learn about an alpha male, and I was actually taught this by a colleague of mine at work, a very intelligent guy. He said the whole thing about an alpha male is probably one of the biggest sort of BS created by other men who are trying to claim to be strong. Now, it's all a theory, like I was mentioning earlier. An alpha male, a beta male, they're all theories, and they're used to describe strong men and weak men. But a beta male is not a weak man. He's just someone that is as strong as an alpha male, but he doesn't like to be at the forefront of everything. Now, I know you were talking about that at the start, being at the forefront. But there's so many other qualities with that.
What I'm trying to get at is what you're saying, the construed idea of alpha males.
Yes,
that's what I'm referring to, yeah? So people feel like they need to show that, like, I'm the strongest, I'm the wealthiest, I'm the most powerful. But the idea I'm trying to get at is that sense of alpha male, or that sense of I need to show people who I am. Come on, we're all guys, yeah? We've been in friendship groups where someone's spoke. Bro, even the nerd used to do this, yeah? Like, oh, that guy came to me and asked me for my help in his homework, not you. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you've spoken to a girl's chatted to you, you've had an interaction, a guy feels a need to show off and get approval.
That's a boy mentality whilst we're boys.
But why? Because they're insecure. They are insecure. And the funny thing about this is, a man is meant to be all about security, or I'm a notion of security for my family, for my friends, but we're so insecure about ourselves that we need to be like, hey, look how much money I got, look at the girls I speak to, and look at the products that I have. Like it's contradictory. It makes no sense. And I think this is one of the problems that we have as men.
Where do you think it comes from?
So this is the other thing I want to talk about: role models. I think it comes from, as kids, we look up to anything as role models. Naturally, that's what we do as kids. We look up to. One of the biggest ones, this is so weird, like I never really thought about it, but I was listening to so many podcasts recently, and they mentioned different role models like supervillains, superheroes, music artists, but one character that always came up was James Bond. Like this idea of being so cool, so suave, so powerful, yet so confident.
The ladies' man.
Being able to get what he wants with the women whenever he wanted, being able to kill when the time came, and so slick and so respected. That's what we looked up to, and we were like, that's what a true man is. But in reality, is it?
No.
Like, is it really?
No.
Like, does he show values? Does he show what it takes to contribute to society, to be a family man? None of those things are in it. But because as kids, like, we just watch it and we are impressionable to these things, we take it on board without realizing. And if we're not guided, like you're saying, by, you know, an older sibling, a father, a mentor, whatever it is, then we struggle to find that path again. And I think that is one of the issues. So I want to ask you guys, like, in your opinion, who is an upstanding role model that you look up to and say, wow, this is a man, he embodies everything that it takes to be a man, and I would love to be like them. Like, is there someone that you can mention, and why?
You guys are probably going to mention celebrities or someone from the past. I thought I'd make it more local, Leicester-wise. Only reason being is that what they do, it matches the three key words I've mentioned in the beginning, what defines a man. One of them would be Arif Faraji, help the homeless, because he's changing the society. He's anti-corruption, so he's changing what's bad, what people look at as bad, and actually putting the good into it. And the second was Dalbag, how we had him on the podcast and he spoke about how he was with his kid, how he looked after his kid by inviting another kid over.
I was literally thinking about that the other week.
Like, stuff like that, it's just, that is what you call a strong man, solid man. I don't care how much he deadlift. When I look at Dalbag, that's a man to me. Like, that's a man. I don't know how much he deadlifts. Dalbag, I hope he deadlifts a lot. But that is strong, because number one, he was active with his kid, and he understood, and he didn't just like
he's
he didn't brush it under the
he's
table.
separated from the mother as well.
Yeah,
So exactly what we talked about earlier, he's still there for his kid.
Exactly, and that's what I'm trying to say. It's like it's those situations that are it's a minor, when he grows up he'll forget it. So brush it under the carpet and cover it with a rug. Like that's not how it worked with him. It was like more like, I'm gonna do something about it, just to show my kid that I'm gonna be a role model. I'm gonna be someone that will look after you no matter what. That's what I love. So these two people for me are like men, in my opinion, not only because of what they do, but their character and the manners and the change that they want to make in society.
Yeah.
For me, that's everything.
Yeah, I've met both men. I've spoken to both men, and I have no quarrels with that selection. What about you, Aadil?
So you went current, so I'm gonna go to the past. So like you listen to podcasts, I've been listening to a lot of lectures and podcasts as well. And there's one about a man called Salahuddin Ayyubi. Now the reason I respect him, and I'm gonna give you a quick backstory about this lad. So Salahuddin Ayyubi was born in, if I'm correct, near modern day Syria, but then went to study because of how vast the empire was in modern day Egypt. Because Salahuddin Ayyubi had a teacher when he was younger that he respected and admired so much, and it was because this person was very educated. So he, as a person, had that role model and wanted to become super educated. So he moved to modern day Egypt, and he studied there, and he stayed out there as long as possible, studying, because he wanted to be the most learned individual there's ever been. While he was studying, because at such a young age he was known to be so responsible, and so he used to take care of everyone around him, the people there said, we want you to be our leader, and I want you to lead us into growing our empire, because he was very quick with his thinking tactically. So as he was growing up, he then ended up becoming the biggest leader for the whole empire, and claimed back modern day Jerusalem for the people. So back then called Constantinople. And even when he took over Constantinople, the leaders of the opposition army said, this man is so upstanding, he's going to be one of the greatest to have ever been, because of how knowledgeable and quick he was with his thinking tactically. But not only that, as a man, he was such an upstanding person. All the kids and all the young people of the era and of the kingdom, they loved him. And they said, I want to be like Salahuddin. And there's a very famous quote mentioned, I'll put it on the screen because I can't remember at the moment, but the opposition army said, there will be no other man to stand for in Constantinople as great as Salahuddin was. Obviously, as Muslims, we know that Umar radiallahu anhu was the first to ever get Constantinople. He was, but for them, the modern era, and this was in 1100s, is it after Christ? Or before Christ? No, it was after Christ. Anyway, for him, he is the most outstanding man I know.
Nice.
Wow. But why?
Because of
you said
knowledge.
He said that he's someone that seeks
because
knowledge.
of his honour, and how he was a role model for so many people. And not only that, he took his kingdom and his people and led them away from being persecuted into becoming the strongest.
I see.
The reason I admire him so much is because of how he could turn a situation around through his own intellect. That's what I admire. A man who can go into a situation and rescue the situation by his intellect. For me, that makes a man. Like just being smarter and ahead of the game.
No cap.
Yeah.
No cap.
You know, obviously we know about this man. He's a great man. He was very resolute. So I wanna mention what arguably is the greatest man. Well, is the greatest man that we believe, and as Muslims, but also a lot of non-Muslims who read into his life and what his values were and what he was as a person would also agree that he is the greatest man that's ever lived, that's ever set foot on this planet, on this world. And that is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, before I go into why, I want to ask you, what is the first word, as in like a characteristic, that comes into mind when I mention Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What's the first word that comes into your mind?
Merciful.
Kind.
Yes. And do you both agree? Obviously we already know, but would you both say you both agree that he's the world's greatest man that's ever stepped foot on this world? Yeah.
On this planet, yeah.
So, doesn't that, just those two questions alone, we've established he's the greatest man in the world, and the first two words, the first word that came into your mind were merciful, and what was it again? Kind. So how is the greatest man in the world, he's attributed not by his strength, not by his money, going back to our original points, not by the amount of people that he led, by his compassion, his mercy and his kindness. So that goes to prove, to show every single man, every person that's listening to this, and us as well, that the first thing that we need to look for is that empathetic value. And what he had that surpassed any other human being was his emotional intelligence. And before I even go into that, I just want to mention that he was actually one of the strongest, if not the strongest man upon his people. Like we say that Umar was the strongest man. He was the strongest Sahabi. But when he first met the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to kill him, the Prophet ﷺ grabbed him by his shoulders and just shook him. And Umar dropped to the floor because of his brute strength. So we already know that he's the strongest man, but we never attribute his physical strength. We never attribute his power and influence. We attribute his kindness to it. So does that not mean that we need to adopt kindness in everything that we do in order to be great men, in order to be great leaders?
Yeah. 100%.
And for me, that's why he is the greatest man to ever live. Like his emotional intelligence was beyond what we can imagine. And because he's so perfect, we know that we can never reach that level, but we can try. I don't know why. Just speaking about it, I just don't feel like I'm man enough. Like I need to work on these values.
That's the whole point of this podcast, isn't it? It's about spreading the love and examples, not only of how we have become men or trying to become a strong man, but how we can improve as well. Identifying self-improvement. Because I seen on Instagram the other day, I don't even know his at, I forgot his at, but it was yesterday, and he posted, it was regarding the Sarah Everard case, and he mentioned that the first person I need to educate about women and stuff is myself. So that we need to actually do some self-reflection, talk about ourselves as a man. Are we protectors of women, and are we educating the people around us to know the value of women and protect the women as well? So that, it was crazy, because it was like, he's not telling other people off, he's talking about himself. Am I good enough? Am I manly enough to actually be considered a man in society to make a good society?
Confront his own issues.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I was just a book I was reading yesterday. Actually, there was a quote. I think it was by Rumi, but I can't remember. I think it is. And the quote says, "I was knowledgeable. I wanted to change the world, but now I have wisdom. I want to change myself." So he's showing that it's. The first thing that we need to do as men, or as any human, is to bring about the changes in ourselves. And once we do that, just naturally, through that change in yourself, the change will just, it's infectious, it's contagious, it just kind of flows through the people around you.
The first time I heard that quote was when I told everyone I wanted to change 1 billion lives.
Yeah.
So a lot of my followers sent that to me, and I was like, 100%, that is something I'm always going to be constantly doing, improving as a man and improving as a person. And I think that's where I realised, as much as we want to become better men and become an honourable man, first and foremost what we need to understand is, what does it take to be a good person? Overall, being a good person takes 3 things, in my opinion. And the 3 things I would say are empathy, I think, is the first, because the Prophet Muhammad was the most empathetic person. He could put himself into every single person's shoes and understand exactly what they're going through. Because only when you understand what another person is going through can you yourself understand what they need. Secondly, I believe every single person should be kind, like you're saying. And thirdly, every single person should be wise. Wise in knowing that whatever is going on, it doesn't truly affect only them, it affects me. And then wisdom comes from experience, but wisdom is the number 1 cure for stopping a lot of people from doing wrong.
Yeah.
When it comes down to that quote you're mentioning, if every single person was to change themselves, there would be no world, because the way the world works is there needs to be a problem for there to be a solution for the world to continue building. And from that wisdom, we understand that there's always going to be bad people. But as long as we're working on ourselves, at some level, we're still going to be flawed. no matter what. Because you can try working on yourself your whole life, but before you die, there's still going to be so many things wrong with you that other people are going to say, you still need to fix that, you still need to fix that. But focus on your core strengths.
How you're saying work on your strengths, don't be overwhelmed by weaknesses. I feel like the one main thing men need to do is to drop the ego and actually identify what their problems are. Because like, if you're listening to this, oh, that's not my problem, oh, I don't have this problem, but then you kind of got to take a step back and reflect that, you know what I'm doing here with this person, or this action I'm doing is having this effect on my family and my society. Once you humble yourself a bit and understand that these are a problem, you can change. With acknowledgement comes change. So lower the ego and identify what your problems are. As well as us, we have to do the same thing as well.
Of course. I was just going to ask, I wanted to go into some of the common problems that we have as men, and you know, you mentioned one of the biggest ones, the ego complex. And I think
It's about toxic masculinity.
I mean, it does come under toxic masculinity, but I feel like ego is such a big problem
This is the part where everyone's going to perk up and really pay attention because they want to know what we're going to say. Is it going to be controversial?
I think,
really controversial.
Do you know what, yeah? I'm going to be completely honest with you, yeah? The things that we're going to mention right now, including this ego complex, it's hard to talk about because it's a problem that I go through. And I would go as far to say that almost all men struggle to go through. Like, you have to have that battle very, very frequently. And if you're finding yourself, like you said, like, oh, I'm not that person, I don't have an ego problem, I don't have toxic masculinity, I don't have all these other things that we're going to mention, then I would say to you, sit down and just listen and just comment below what you got to say, because we, as men, we have so much, we live in denial so much, yeah, and I think it's such a bad trait to have. But yeah, going into one of the biggest problems that we have as men, in my opinion, is just the anger and the lack of patience, which I think derives from this kind of desire or this feeling to be dominating in every aspect of life, in owning people and things. And I think it brings about so many issues, particularly when it comes to working with other people, working with women, working with children, working with our families. And it's like, do you know, like, we always, like, every boy, every man wants to be a man. They want to be listened to. They want to be acknowledged. Yeah, no one wants to be put to the side and ignored. You know what I'm saying? But it gets to a point where sometimes we misplace that and we go above and beyond to a point where it is toxic. Like, do you know how, like, a lot of, like, gangsters and a lot of in our friendship groups as kids in schools, we'd only be involved in a fight if we believed we had the upper hand. Like, we would never start a fight, or very rarely we'd start a fight with someone that's bigger and stronger than us, or someone that we know can bring other man to this fight. Do you know what I'm saying? But wouldn't a real man, like, if there's a time to fight against injustice, regardless of your ability, like, position and ability, you would do something to fight that. I'm not saying like put yourself at risk, but I'm saying you would do something.
We're just being boys.
You do something to kind of overcome it.
Are boys weak men, or boys, and weak men are weak men?
Yeah.
Because I think obviously boys is like,
because we've all been boys. This is the difference that people need to have. It's like, at the age of 18, 19, yeah, I'm going to use this word, you can blur it out, but fuckboy is like a word that was used a lot. But if you're 18, 19, you're a fuckboy, does that make you a weak man, or does that just make you a boy?
Still a boy.
No,
still a boy.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
This is the controversial
No. I think you're still a boy, because the moment, so in my opinion, when you're still 18, 19, you're still a boy. Even though you're classified a young man by law, you're still a young boy, because simply because you have not had enough experience in order to be a man. Like, I believe what makes someone a man is, yes, having responsibilities, but having the responsibilities of being like a role model as such. Now, when you're 18, 19, I don't think the onus of being a role model is on you just yet, because you're still learning. But if you're 25 and still being an F-boy, then you're a weak man.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I think.
Let me. Okay, so I do agree. I think being a man comes with maturity and understanding. I would say it's got very little correspondence to correlation to age, yeah. But I would say like the first step to becoming a man is to accept your responsibilities, and then from that point you're a man. A weak man would kind of disregard his responsibilities. Sometimes fulfill them, sometimes not. That's a weak man. A strong man would fulfill them all the time. But a boy is someone who disregards his responsibilities, and you can disregard your responsibilities like going up to become a father, to become married, become a father, have grandchildren. You can be a boy mentality wise because you're disregarding your responsibility towards your house, your household, the people in your family, your friends, the society. So that's how I would define it. Like I would say that most of my friends are pretty much, they're all men, and they're just on that spectrum of being a weak man or a strong man. They lie somewhere on that spectrum.
So let me. The reason I'm going to debunk one part of what you said, which is them age not mattering, age not being a big reason. I personally have the understanding that age is one of the most important things to always acknowledge. Yes, you can be 18, 19 and doing amazing things, but in terms of experience and wisdom, you're not gonna ever be at the same level as a person who monetary wise and responsibility wise is at the same spectrum. Now, I do believe a young person at the age of 16, 17 can be as great in terms of knowledge as other people. For example, you have those people like child geniuses, etc. But I always think wisdom is so important. Like, I was having a conversation before because I want to make a point of that. I was having a conversation with someone who is currently teaching me how to fight, bro. Just that. But I had a very deep conversation with him, and he said, even when it comes down to age, you can have someone that's 18, 19, a great fighter, but he could still get beat up by someone at the same weight level that's older, because with age, you mature, kind of like fine wine. You mature in terms of strength, in terms of wisdom, and in terms of just life experience. It's a different ball game altogether.
Yeah.
Now, the reason age matters is because you stop being a boy the moment you have the ability to your balls drop, basically. That's the terminology they use. The moment your balls drop, you are classified a man, but you're still a teenager until the age of 19, right? That's just the reason. That's the kind of spectrum or boxes they put us in. But at the same time, someone's balls could not drop until they're the age of, let me just say, 30, because they have not become a man just yet, because they've never had the responsibilities in terms of what you're talking about and taking up the responsibilities of so many things. But everyone ages at different times.
Yeah.
Like, this is my complete honest thing. Everyone ages.
100%.
I know so many 25, 26-year-olds that still act like teenagers because life has not hit them yet.
Yeah.
They've not had these responsibilities and things. So yeah, age doesn't matter in terms of some things, but in the wider spectrum of things, I think age does matter.
Okay, so I agree with, again, you agree with most of what I say, I agree with most of what you say. So I think age plays a big part, yeah, because obviously it goes without saying, it's inevitable, the longer you live, the more experiences you have. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is man in terms of physically being a man, and there is man in terms of maturity, mentality. So every boy becomes a man around 14, 15 years old, yeah, but every boy in terms of maturity doesn't become a man until they accept the responsibilities. And you say let's say, I'm using this example very loosely. Let's say there's a lad who brought up in a privileged family. Like he's gonna have less responsibilities, no doubt. But when he's become a man and he's going through life, he's hit 18, 19, 20, and he's experienced the world a little bit, he's tasted the world, he needs to acknowledge that it is now his responsibility to protect and serve his younger siblings, his mom and his dad. And if until the moment he doesn't accept that responsibility, I wouldn't classify him as a mature individual, as a man. And that's my basic understanding of what a man is.
I agree with that.
I would say he's a weak man then.
I wouldn't say he's a man at all. A man gets his status of being a man by the responsibilities he acknowledges. A man,
that's just your.
That's my opinion. And a man being ranked in the spectrum of being a weak man and a strong man, and everything in between, is attributed to how much of their responsibilities they fulfill. So you become a man by acknowledging your responsibilities, and your level of how strong of a man you are is determined by how well and how many of the responsibilities you do fulfill. I hope that clarifies what I'm trying to say.
I'd agree with that, and I would also add in, it comes down to, again, acknowledging your weaknesses and being a weak man, or men that don't understand the impact, the negative impact that their actions are having upon
100%.
the family, friends and society.
100%.
That's the spectrum for me. I want to ask you guys a question then, if you don't mind. When do you think that you transitioned from a weak man to somewhat understanding you're being weak and that you need to become strong? I personally wouldn't say us three, or you speak for yourself, I wouldn't say I am a strong man, but I'm trying my best to be, and I'm moving away from being a weak one, if that makes sense. So when did you guys acknowledge that you were a weak man? I can start off with myself if you want.
I can answer that question. But
Go
yes,
ahead. Okay, so I'll go first. I would say genuinely in the last year, like a year from now till last year, I genuinely believe that's when I've realised I had a lot of weaknesses. That's why I'm happy to preach this conversation, because I don't want to come across as a saint that I've been a man since I was 18. I haven't. I've been really weak. 18, 19, 20. I've been weak. I've been 21. I was weak as well. Only until maybe between 21, 22. That's when I started realising, you know what? I'm being weak, man. Like I'm not being a real man. So I need to fix up. I need to pull my socks up. Personally, that's from me. What about yourselves?
Do you want to go first or shall I?
You go first.
Okay. So, do you know what? Yeah, one thing that I use this word loosely, take pride in myself, is that I feel like I'm matured at a very young age. But obviously, maturity is not something that happens once; it happens over and over and over again as you go through life. So, I feel like I hit a level of maturity at a very young age when I was in secondary school. But in terms of becoming a man itself, as soon as I would say second year college, so I was 17. That's when I felt like, okay, I am starting to become a man, because I was at college and I started working. I used to work with my dad every now and then before that, but that was just under his guidance. And I got my first job when I was 17, and I started going to the gym and I started pursuing my passions in life. And I think the combination of those three things was when I was on this journey to becoming a man.
Okay, I agree with that. I didn't know we were talking about in that context.
No, but in terms of, you said when did you start moving away from becoming a weak man? At that point, I was still a very young man. I was a weak man. I didn't have much responsibilities.
But you are a man.
So I felt like that's when I started to become a man. But I was a weak man through that year of college, and I took a gap year, and I think that's where I had another sort of big step up in becoming a slightly stronger man, because I started to work full time and I started taking on more responsibilities. I became, having my own business and whatnot.
What age though do you think you transitioned away from being a weak man?
Being a weak man.
But weak man, not responsibility. I'm talking about weak man as if the actions you were doing were of someone that isn't a strong man. That was my question. I've been working from 15, so I can call myself a man.
Yeah,
15. I started a business at 18, but that
me,
didn't make me a man. Starting a business at 18 did not make me a man. It just made me mature.
No, but as in when I say I started to work, that means I started to provide a source of income for my family that they needed it at the time.
Amazing.
Yeah, do you know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't working because I wanted to bloody pay for my phone or pay for going out. I didn't have that luxury. When I started to work, it was to contribute towards the house, contribute towards
inspiring, man,
bringing bringing income to the house, not personal benefit. That's why I mentioned that. Yeah. And then in my gap year, I went to college, and I feel like that's when I started to really become a man, because I started to venture out and start to expand my network. And I think 2 years ago, when I mentioned that whole loneliness thing that I mentioned in the previous podcast, that was a big step for me. And also this year, 2022, genuinely believe my growth as a man in the last, we're in March now, 3 months, 2.5 months, has been so exponential, because I've learned so much about myself and so much about what I want to be, that I feel like I've now, I feel like all that time I was a weak or moderate man, but now I'm going to that stage where I'm I can say I am starting to become a strong man, because of the difficulties that I've been put through in life in the last 2-3 months. I feel like life has thrown so much at me. I have had no choice but to become a strong man. Like, I have either had the choice to downgrade, to become a weak man, become a boy and cower away from all the responsibilities that life has thrown at me, or become that strong man, become that upstanding man, become a role model for my younger brother, for my nephews, and for all the people that, you know, watch the work that I do, that we do, and look up to us in some way. Like, I have that responsibility. I feel like I have been forced to become a strong man. Yeah, and I'm not saying like forced, like I don't want to do it. Like, I really appreciate that growth.
I loved what you mentioned.
I'd say in the last 2 months, like really has been
100%.
a massive.
I adore what you mentioned about running away from your problems, because I was gonna touch up on that at one point. But a man that runs away from a battle is a weak man. Like, it doesn't mean you need to go through. Again, we can go through this in toxic masculinity part, but like running away from a battle where you were faced with so many difficulties and you ran away, you didn't even try to do something, that would have made you a weak man. 100%. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm carefree about that.
Yeah.
But if you tried your best to fight it and you lost a battle, that doesn't make you a weak man,
No,
because
doesn't.
you tried to fight. Running away from a war is being coward. Not a war as in sword fight, a war within life.
Yeah.
What life throws at you. Financial war, emotional war, breakups, heartbreak, anything like that. If you're running away from the problem, not trying to solve it, you're not man enough yet. That's my opinion, that you're just not man enough yet for any problem that comes your way. If you don't at least try to resolve it, because it's your responsibility to, then...
It's a very, like,
You know.
we say it, yeah, and I know it comes off that it's such an easy thing to do.
It's not easy at all.
Bro, like,
It's not easy.
Like, I know there's a lot of guys that are going to be, that hopefully that are listening to this right now and are going through their struggles, and, you know, if you're considering, like, giving up and all that kind of stuff, you know, like, we know that mental health is a really bad issue among men, and the
100%.
suicide rate is way too high. I feel for you guys, and I'm telling you, like for me, and I'm sure for you guys as well, like, we've had to go through that battle and that struggle, and I promise you that the fight is always worth it.
Of course.
Always worth it.
Makes you stronger.
And yeah, man, that's all I
Makes you
can say,
stronger.
man.
Adil, what about you?
Mine, bro. So I'm not going to do what SA did and start explaining when he started becoming a man.
No one wants to know when the balls drops. Yeah, we just want to know your transition of being weak, identifying that you are weak.
I felt like some context was necessary.
Nah, see, he was being...
He wanted to make us two look really weak. Do you know?
Wow.
Smart, bro.
So for me, it started in 2019. So... For me, in 2019, I acknowledge I had started becoming a man, yes, and I was a man, but I wasn't doing the one simple thing that I had to do, which was accept responsibility. Accept responsibility for my actions, accept responsibility for that I wasn't being a provider, I wasn't being someone that was a source of strength, nothing like that. But 2019 was when I think I acknowledged and I started becoming a strong man. I think since 2019 I've become a stronger man, and now I feel like I am a strong enough man for everything in terms of responsibility, in terms of so many different things. I think I am a fully grown man now. Now, not in terms of so many areas of my life can be improved. I might not be the term of James Bond macho man like the world sees, but I think I am a man now. And Alhamdulillah, I think I've accepted that at this point in my life, I can do so much more than what I could have done 2 years ago.
Definitely.
But 2019 was when it all started.
We need to have another conversation when we're all married. We need to have another conversation. Oh, you're a strong man, Adil?
Did you,
When we have kids.
Bro, the responsibilities
God
when
willing.
you get married and have a family are
Bro,
different.
do you know what though? Right now I can tell you one thing, yeah. I'm still a weak man in everyone else's definition. But in my personal definition, I think I'm a strong man. But when I have a kid, I will be a different definition of a man. When I have a wife and I have a house over, I'm having to provide for a house, etc. For just my own family, that's a different ballgame altogether. But in terms of being a real man,
I'm gonna ask a question. I don't expect a reply, but whose viewpoint and opinion matters the most? Yours, or what I am as a man, or what other people see me as a man? I'm not expecting an answer. You don't have to answer.
you know, from one answer, mine is myself.
Me is myself.
The last sort of topic I want to talk about, And I think if there's any females listening, I think this is going to be the most favourite part to talk about.
Feminists.
If you guys got anything to comment on this, anything to add, feel free to put it in the comments as always. But I want to touch upon toxic masculinity. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I just want to touch upon it. And there are toxic masculinity traits that are out there that a lot of us go through or battle and struggle with. But I think the whole ideology of it has been construed a lot with social media. But the thing that I want to talk about, something that I was going through, the process took me years and years, 3-4 years, maybe even longer, is the idea of vulnerability. We are given this idea or this notion that men should never ever be vulnerable. Now, the approach that I have with this is that I feel like men should be sort of the provider of strength. We talked about different types of provision, and I think provider of strength, especially in scenarios where there is chaos and the people around you are struggling to keep their cool or struggling, the emotions are sort of, I want to say out of control, but they're they're overwhelming. So in that moment, I feel like if you're the man, or maybe there's no man there, I'm just gonna say if you're a woman, for example, you're a woman with your kids, you are the person of most responsibility at that time, and most of the time it will be the man, the older brother, the father, whatever it is. In that moment of chaos, in that moment of uncontrollable emotions, you do not have the luxury to cry and show your weak emotions. I'm going to say that again because I truly believe this. In that moment of chaos, as a man, you do not have that luxury to be weak and cry. You need to harness the power to delay your tears. And this comes with the prerequisite of remembering to, when you delay your tears, it does not mean terminate them tears, it means delay them. It means that when the time is right, those tears come out, those emotions come out. Because those tears carry so much power, they carry so much emotion, that if you lock it up inside you, that the time that it does come out, it will come out in such a bad way that will affect you in such a negative manner, and it will affect the people around you, and you will not be able to describe or explain where it's come from. You see, I used to have this saying, I have a large rug and such a big bottle, because I kick everything under the rug and I bottle everything up. That's the approach I used to have to life, and I realized slowly, with the friends like you guys, my friends and my family, this is not the way to live life. And when it did come out for me, I was like, what the hell? I'm crying about things that happened to me 3, 4, 5 years ago. What's wrong with me? This doesn't make sense. And once you harness this ability to delay your tears, delay your emotions, you'll see that you're able to bring people together, you're able to lead, you're able to overcome. And once that scenario is overcome, you'll see that the people that you held together in that time of chaos, now you have all of their support, and they're looking after you now because you looked after them in that time. And that is the role that I think men need to play when it comes to times of struggle and times of turmoil. And for me, I always remember back my first accident, when everyone around me was crying and they couldn't control their emotions, and the men that were there at the time, they wanted to fight or they wanted to look after the people around them. Because for me in that time, it came naturally to me, and I think maybe it came from that idea of bottling up the tears. But I was able to manage people and keep people cool and look after everyone around me. That once I realized that everyone was okay, we went to a park later on that day, and I just couldn't control it. I let the tears out, and everyone that was there in that situation was looking after me, and I felt like it was such a beautiful way. And I think that's in my opinion, that's I think how God has created man. Man should be able to control their emotions, but we need to remember that we need to let it out at one point. And if we don't let it out, that's the idea of toxic masculinity.
It's for a man to cry. You can definitely cry. If you think it's weak for a man to cry, not you, just not listening. Yeah. You're twisted. No, crying is a point of vulnerability.
I'm going to disagree with both of you.
No, let me just quickly say, crying is a point of vulnerability. You're vulnerable in that moment. It doesn't make you less of a man. I think in that moment you are vulnerable and weak, but it doesn't make you a weak man, if that makes sense. It doesn't make you less of a man.
No, I'm going to explain myself. and this is my personal belief, and if you disagree with me, that's fine, but just try to understand from where I'm talking about. I don't think it's okay for another man to cry in any scenario but two. And this is my opinion. The first time you're allowed to cry, in my personal opinion, is when you're by yourself talking to God. I think that's when you
100%.
need to cry.
100%.
And the second time is... I'm going to give three, actually.
Wait, are we just giving...
I'm just saying my opinion on when...
Are we just giving tears of sadness or tears of joy, yeah?
Let me just explain, bro. So the only time I think it's okay to cry is when you're praying to God, when you're by yourself, and if you're in a conversation with someone that you respect and you're asking for guidance from in a point of struggle. So for example, you're with your father, he's elderly, you're now talking to him, and from seeing him being in such a state of vulnerability and sadness, I think it's okay to cry in front of your father. Or like your wife, when you're going through a tough time and you've just overcome something, like you were talking about, overcoming something. I think it's okay to cry in those situations. I don't think it's okay to cry in terms of you're in a situation, let's just say for example, you're being mugged, you're being attacked. Never cry in that situation, please. I do not understand how someone can cry in moments where they're weak. Yeah, and this is just my personal opinion. I don't think a man should cry in that situation. Tears of joy is something different. I don't associate that with tears in general. Yeah. I think that, it is tears of joy, but that's something you're allowed to do, like, of course. But in terms of weakness, I don't think you can cry in a moment where say for example, have you seen those videos where guys getting knocked out in public, and they're being frail and weak? For me, nah. You can't be like that in that situation. You can't be frail, you can't be weak in that situation, and you cannot cry in front of your aggressor. Like, I as a man, I don't think you can do that. I think you're allowed to cry when you're talking to your mother, your wife, your father, people higher, wiser than you, or people are close to you in that sense. But I don't think you can cry in front of your kids, for example. I don't think a man should be crying in front of his kids in terms of situations where, like, I just feel like your kid's gonna lose that kind of respect and that status for you in one sense.
I know a lot of people are gonna be like, that's toxic masculinity. I understand where you're coming from. With an open mind, I can understand where you're coming from.
I understand completely.
Like, if your kids are there and like your dad just passed away and you're crying, that's different.
Yeah, you mean like if you're like...
But you can't be crying in front of your kids in a situation of like something where you're...
Emotional problems. Yeah, that's true.
Like it's situational, basically.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I genuinely can agree with that.
But there's very few situations where I believe it's okay for a man to cry. And like, I gave those three in terms of where you're with someone that is, in terms of your close companion, or someone that is older and wiser than you, and you're seeking wisdom from them, or they're frail or ill or something like that, to God. And the third situation that you can cry is by yourself. Like when you're by yourself, completely fine to cry, because you have to let it out. But in front of other people, I think that's when you're talking about. Like, do you know when you were crying after the situation was done?
It wasn't like in front of everyone. It was kind of like secluded
by yourself,
only.
That's okay. Like, but when
I
you're in front of everyone, nah, man.
I think naturally, most men, like they like the genetics or like the composition wouldn't like that. People call it ego, but it just wouldn't allow them. Like naturally, you wouldn't allow yourself to cry in front of too many people. Anyway,
you'd be surprised, man. You'd be surprised. But even like this, just talk about Islamically, you're meant to cry in front of other people.
Like
from my knowledge, you're not supposed to cry in front of people that are. So the exact scenario and situation given was that they were advised, if you were to ever cry, to go away from people and cry.
If you can.
I agree.
100%.
So we were talking about what toxic masculinity you're saying.
Toxic masculinity. I just mentioned vulnerability as an example.
Okay.
So like, are there any other like sort of toxic masculinity issues that you are maybe working on, or that you've overcome, that you can maybe give some advice on? Or
not for myself, but for society or social media, as we've mentioned, there's two things that contradict each other. So there's two things. One of them's emotional, like taking in stress, taking in problems. So there's two sides of this I want to explain. There's one side where it becomes toxic masculinity, by expecting a man to hide the mental health issues that he's facing from these problems. So as a man, you need to take on the problems and stress of life. Like, you're meant to deal with it in an unemotional matter, and if it doesn't make you emotional, you need to be strong about it, as strong as you can, as I spoke about earlier, fighting a war. But if it starts to affect your mental well-being, and you're still told by society or by your wife or by a female or by anyone else that no, who cares about your mental health, you need to continue fighting this problem, that's when it becomes toxic, because it starts to overtake your mental well-being. But if it's not affecting your mental well-being, you need to man up a bit and kind of fight it, yeah? Second one is financial stability or finances. A man, in my opinion, a strong man, is a man that provides. Doesn't mean you need to be rich or buy a fancy car. It means provide for your family, meaning your kids, your wife. Yeah? That's what a man is. Even if your wife earns more than you, there's nothing wrong with that. But you still need to provide something, which is finances at least. Finances, emotional stability for family, love and care, and time. Like, you need to be active, as I mentioned earlier. However, the toxic masculinity of that side is expecting a man to be rich. Because, as you mentioned earlier, not everyone is granted that opportunity in life to become an entrepreneur or to have right investments. Some people are happy with 30 grand a year. But if they're providing, that is financial stability. That makes you a strong man. But just because you're not earning 300 grand a year doesn't make you a weak man. It's the fact that you are being a breadwinner. You are doing something, at least paying for the bills.
I would even
paying for the groceries. But the minute you're and it happens a lot with women, I'm not pointing a finger at everyone, but they have an expectation that my man has to be rich, and if you're setting that example, that is toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
But if you want to find a rich man, you need to find one that's come from a rich background or has the capability of becoming rich one day, or already rich.
Yeah.
But you can't expect a broke man or a man that wants to settle for 40 grand a year, which for some is rich, for some is not. You can't expect more from him. You can't expect a Lamborghini if he's on 40 grand a year.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of toxic masculinity is breeded from social media and women and social media.
Yeah.
But do you know the point that you're saying? I would even go further in terms of the provision, like food and money, finances, the roof over the head, all that kind of stuff. Like, I would even, a man who is just working towards that, like, I would say that's a man.
100%.
Like,
man.
even
100%. Uni students, for example, they go to uni for a degree for something they love, so they can get a job, so they can get paid to provide. If that's your intention, you're already a man, in my opinion. Like, even if you're not earning, as I said earlier, it's not about even earning, it's trying to earn, trying to
the potential and
trying to breadwin
yeah.
is manly as hell, man. Like, I've got so much respect for anyone that tries to work so hard. Even if you're on minimum wage, you've got absolute respect from me, because you're still trying to provide, even for yourself. Amazing, man.
I think
like,
also, like, even to like a degree, like, it's self-respect. A man should be doing things that builds his self-respect. And if you're earning, regardless of what you're doing, how much you're earning, as long as that income is legal, it's lawful, it's halal, and it's done in an honest way, bro, you deserve the respect as a man. Like, it doesn't matter what you do or who says what, you've earned that respect. That's it. Full stop.
A lot of the toxic masculinity has been risen through trying to seek out respect, trying to be known for being a good man, like being a great man that social media deems as a great man, having so much about you. For example, having fast cars and designer drip and having lots of money and being able to spoil your girl, and then spoiling one girl and showing it on social media so another girl messages you. Like, a lot of people do that, bro. I'm not even lying. And that's where toxic masculinity is, I think it truly is breeded from.
I agree.
It's from people trying to seek out respect and props, and what's the word that everyone uses on social media?
Clout.
Not attention, clout from other people. Like, that's where a lot of toxic masculinity has come from. And now, because of this, a lot of women on social media now fantasize it. I want a man that does all of this stuff.
I want a man
that's got respect.
I want a man to show me off.
Yeah, like, so many things come from that. So other men on social media, young boys actually, come onto social media, have been brought up by social media, because they see all these role models on social media, and now they have to do this too. And I think if they can't do that anymore, then you're not a good enough male, and that's where toxic masculinity comes from. And then a lot of men now try to front it. For me, it's from trying to seek respect from other men and also get attention from women. That's where a lot of toxic masculinity.
It's an epidemic, really and truly, isn't it? So these are like some of the toxic masculinity traits that sort of we come across or we're going through now or have been through. But are there any others that you quickly? Because I can think of a few. Are there any others that you can quickly just mention?
What do you think? I think there's a couple, like men not being able to So like a couple that people go into before they get married, right? Not wanting to cook. Like my wife should cook for me when I get back home, that sort of stuff. Like old traditional viewpoints. Not having to do you know when a Mufti Menk was knitting and a lot of men were saying, why is he knitting for? He's been a bad a man or misrepresenting. Like stuff that traditionally back in the day was meant for women, like men nowadays don't think that they should do it. And I think a lot of that comes down to toxic masculinity.
Diluted by culture.
You can't be like you shouldn't be walking your just generally like you shouldn't be holding your wife's bag. Like that's wrong. And just general stuff like that I think is really toxic.
Respecting a woman in certain cultures is basically being seen as being a simp or being wrong, which completely isn't. Respect for a woman, especially from Islamic point of view, is penultimate in our whole mannerism and character. Even the Prophet ﷺ, like taking it from there. Equality, the status of a woman, when she's pregnant she has two hearts inside her body, everything around all of that when you think about it. But what Aadil said, 100%, it's like it comes down to culture. It comes down to like, why can't your wife be an electrician? What's wrong with that? If she wants to go down that route. Why does your wife have to work? Like if she wants to work, she should be allowed to work. Definitely.
I'm still providing.
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you hoovering the carpet? What is wrong with a man hoovering a carpet?
Because I got no carpet.
Okay. But you got a big ass rug, right? Like you had your bottom of that. So maybe you're gonna hoover that. Not tell your wife to do that.
No, do you know what? It's so true, man. And just to wrap up the whole toxic masculinity thing, I think that we can maybe categorize them in sort of two topics. The first one is sort of the toxic masculinity of trying to be alpha and being the best or the strongest amongst other men. And the other one is trying to put this persona or put this front or this facade on in front of women. And I think those are like two categories. And I think we struggle in both sides. But we need to acknowledge where is our problems. Like honestly, today we've mentioned so much, and I think there's so much more to talk about. And like there's so many opinions. Like we've disagreed.
We haven't covered most of them.
We've just like briefly touched upon it. But like, you know, this is how we start to like solve problems, discussions. Like we need more discussions, more open discussions, because if we know what people are thinking, then we can start to. Because if basically what I think the way I approach problems is like this is a societal problem. In order to make a societal problem, in order to bring a solution, what you need is a culture change. And you can only make a culture change if you know what the current culture is, what the current thought, what the current ideology is. So these kind of conversations need to happen more frequently, which is why we recommend you guys to like comment whatever it is. No matter how outlandish your opinions are or how opposing they are to ours, we want to hear them and we want to have a conversation. And you know, we don't mind having another podcast, having a guest on about this again in the future. We're all open to it. But I just want to kind of finally talk about maybe some potential solutions and final piece of advice. But today I want the advice to be to ourselves, that hopefully we can benefit from each other and again our listeners. So I'm just going to quickly cover like some of the solutions that I have to this epidemic, how I describe the epidemic of, you know, the issue of man and manhood. So like I said, the culture change, that's one thing that we need to do. And we can do that through education. So you know how we said men are people that bear responsibilities? One of the biggest responsibilities you have as a man is to be a mentor, to be a role model to, like I said earlier, your younger siblings, your nephews, if you're a teacher, if you're a mentor, the people you're guiding. And if you have children, your sons, you need to educate them, you need to teach them, you need to show them. And the final thing, or the other thing that I would recommend is that every single man should sit down and do a self-evaluation, a SWOT analysis. What this means is identifying your strengths and weaknesses, thinking about how you can strengthen your weaknesses, how you can use your strengths to strengthen your weaknesses, and also to have your own personal set of codes and your own personal ethos. And the final thing that I would recommend that every single man should have, which has helped me personally, is to really think about who you are as a person and have it in your mind, or even write it down, what your core code of conduct should be and what your core ethos is. What values do you want to uphold? Now, we've mentioned quite a few today, kindness, empathy, leadership, but you need to think about what are the values that you want to uphold as a man, what will make you an honourable man. And I think if you have that, it will always be at the back of your mind. Every decision you have, every interaction you have, you'll be like, am I upholding these values? And I think that's going to help us, make that change in ourselves and hopefully make that societal change and a global change even. So those are sort of my three main solutions that we can take upon and look to change this problem in our community, in our society and in the world. Is there any other solutions that you guys would add on to that?
Personally, I think it's making other people feel safe. A big problem in our generation is not being able to control ourselves and thus making other people feel uncomfortable. And I think as men, we should take it on ourselves to not make women or other men feel uncomfortable around us, to feel like a safe haven. And another thing I'd recommend as men is controlling your gaze, but also controlling your tongue. What you say when you're with other men can have a massive effect on what habits you have. Like being around other men, just constantly talking about vulgar stuff is not good as a man. So yeah, when you talk to people, give them value and don't talk about unnecessary things that can, if anyone was listening, make them feel comfortable.
Okay.
I think that's very important.
It doesn't take one man to change society and change the world. It takes a lot of men. And a group of men that unite together with brotherhood will change the society for the better. So if you feel like you're a good man, you feel like you're a strong man, that you're a real man, check on your friends, make sure they're working on themselves as well, because the brotherhood and unity you'll make with them will inevitably change the world, for the best, for the greater good, as I said. And if you are a real man, you'd also be loyal and trustworthy with your closest friends, because those closest friends, the energy is always going to pass on to each other. If you're a role model for them, likewise, then a group of men getting along with each other is the main topic, because a lot of breaks in society, so many examples I don't even need to mention, comes from the fact that men not getting along with each other. Once you unite as men, religion, background, colour, whatever, society will be problem-free, almost.
Yeah, I love that. Truly believe unity is one of the biggest resolves to the world's problems.
Between men specifically.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, just to end off today, I'm going to ask you guys to share one line or one piece of advice that is to yourself, but that can benefit everyone listening, including myself. Let's start with you, Adam.
So on a different note, being a man is a great responsibility for every man listening, every boy that's going to become a man. Don't take what we've said today as something to put you off, but to actually make you understand what greatness you can give to society and what great change you can make. Because as men, we do have the upper hand on so many different things around the world and with so many different situations, and you can just use that for good and bettering the lives of other people.
Perfect.
First and foremost, it's a mindset change. If you, I believe every single person has been unmanly in their life before they became a real man. That everyone has had weak man traits in their life. You can't deny it. We've all it's mistakes and being a boy as well. But if you want to become a strong man, it's a mindset change. So if you put your mind to it, your actions will follow. Once you get to that level that you feel like your transition is in process or happening, you need to start, as I mentioned before, helping the people around you become that strong man as well, because it doesn't take one man to build a society, it takes multiple. So help the guys around you.
I love that. Thank you very much. So the piece of advice that I would give to myself is touching back on a point that I made at the beginning, is that let's remember not to measure how much of a man we are by our external factors, our wealth, our ability to attract women, and our physical strength. Rather, let's work on enhancing our internal strengths, our ability to restrain our anger, and our ability to control our desires that are going to affect ourselves and affect the people around us in a negative light. That is what I would say to myself and to every young adult or everyone that's on this journey to become a more polished man. I think that's going to really, really help a lot of people. But just to end off, that is that is it from us today. Like I said, we could probably go on for hours and hours. And I really want everyone to join in this discussion, men and women alike. Obviously this is a perspective just from 3 men. So it'll be lovely, it'll be amazing to see what the women have to say about what we've said today and whatever they can add on as well. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. If you've come all the way to the end of the video, we really appreciate you guys. Thank you for helping us make waves. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and be part of the movement, because together we can make waves of positivity. Thank you.